Welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. I'm Father John Deere, and today I'm speaking with my friend Bill McKibben, the legendary environmental activist, author, and founder of 350.org and thirdact.org. This podcast is a project of www.beatitudecenter.org, where you can find many other podcasts and regular Zoom programs on the nonviolence of Jesus and practicing nonviolence and working for a more just, more nonviolent, more sustainable world. So I'd like to begin with a little prayer. So I invite everyone who's listening just to take a deep breath wherever you are, and to relax and recenter yourself and enter into the presence of the God of peace who loves you infinitely and personally. Let's welcome the nonviolent Jesus here with us and ask for whatever graces we need to follow the nonviolent Jesus on the path of peace, love, and justice. God of peace, thank you for all the blessings of life, love, and peace that you give us. Be with us as we reflect on the climate crisis and fossil fuels and systemic injustice and what we can do to resist this mess we're in. Bless us, inspire us, strengthen us, and send us out to do your will and follow the nonviolent Jesus, that we might do our bit to help end the destruction of Mother Earth and the creatures, and war itself, and poverty, racism, greed, and all injustice, that we might be your holy beatitude people, your holy peacemakers. In Jesus' name, amen. So here's a quote from my friend Congressman Jamie Raskin, who says about my guest: "If we survive the interlocking plagues of climate change, right-wing authoritarianism, and savage inequality, future generations will utter the name of the New England moral visionary and activist Bill McKibben with the same reverence we speak of Emerson, Thoreau, and Garrison." And it's a real pleasure to welcome my friend Bill McKibben today. Bill is one of the world's leading environmental activists, a best-selling author, founder of 350.org, which is a global grassroots climate campaign which has organized protests on every continent, including Antarctica, for climate action. He played a leading role in launching the opposition to big oil pipeline projects like the Keystone XL and the fossil fuel divestment campaign, which has become the biggest anti-corporate campaign in history, with endowments worth more than $40 trillion stepping back from oil, gas, and coal. He is founder of thirdact.org, which organizes people over the age of 60 to get involved and take action on climate justice. His 1989 book, The End of Nature, is regarded as the first book for a general audience about climate change and was published in 24 languages. He's gone on to write 20 other great books, and his work appears regularly in all kinds of places, including the New Yorker and Rolling Stone. He serves as the Schumann Distinguished Scholar in Environmental Studies at Middlebury College, as a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and has won the Gandhi Peace Prize as well as honorary degrees from 20 colleges and universities, and was awarded the Right Livelihood Award, the alternative Nobel in the Swedish Parliament. If you want to learn more about Bill, see billmckibben.com. So, Bill, a very big, warm welcome to you. I'm so glad to be with you, and thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. And let me say right at the start, a big thank you for all your great visionary leadership, your voice, your organizing, and your lifelong holy work from Mother Earth. So you're welcome, Bill.
Well, it's very, very good to be with you, Father John, and get to say thanks for all your remarkable work. I've learned a lot from your books and from your examples. So what a pleasure to get to talk today.
Great. Thanks, Bill. So here we are, several months into the second Trump administration, and they're quickly dismantling every good policy and law to protect creation and humanity from the worst of climate change, and actively, seems to me, serving the fossil fuel industry as well as coal and logging and destroying the forests and getting as rich off climate change as possible. Not to mention, of course, Bill, the authoritarianism, oligarchy, fascism. I'm going to continue here. I have a list: white supremacy, corporate greed, and I think service to war, basically. And meanwhile, we continue to see almost daily worse and worse climate disasters. So I've told you this, Bill. I sort of don't know where to begin. So I'm just going to give the floor to you and say, what's your take on what's happening and politically and environmentally?
Well, I mean, that's a big and very difficult question. Um, let's begin with the deep background. I mean, the most important thing that's happening on our planet is its rapid heating. We've understood climate change for about 40 years now. That's about how long since Jim Hansen testified before Congress that there was this thing we then called the greenhouse effect, and that was the year I started writing about it. We knew then what the story was. We knew then that we would, if we wanted to prevent the destruction of the planet's climate system, we would need to stop burning coal and gas and oil. And so far, that's proved too high a bar for us. We've kept burning coal and gas and oil, more and more of it all the time. And now the planet is doing precisely what the scientists told us it would do: overheat with disastrous consequences that I won't bother to list at any great detail. And, you know, everybody gets to watch all these things now in real time, whether it's the burning of Los Angeles or the inundation of the Appalachians, or, you know, on and on and on. This is connected to the rest of this trouble too, though, because one of the things that's brought us to the authoritarian pass we're now in is the resistance of the fossil fuel industry towards any attempts to mess with their business model. You'll recall a year ago when Donald Trump was running for president, he told big oil executives that if they gave him $1 billion, he'd do anything they wanted. They gave him $500 million, more or less, and he is doing everything that they ever wanted. And we see the same kind of thing playing out in other parts of the world. Coal and gas and oil seem to almost inevitably breed a kind of despotism, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or in Vladimir Putin's Russia, or wherever it is. And so I looked at in the most positive way, which I will try to do for a little while. We're at the point where there's a new world struggling to be born. The cheapest energy in the world now comes from pointing a sheet of glass at the sun. And that's a great and remarkable gift. The same star that already provides us with light and heat and photosynthesis is willing to provide us with all the power we could ever use. But that great gift, that great gift is a threat to extraordinarily powerful people and interests. And that's one of the reasons, not the only one, that we're now enduring this almost unbelievable siege of something that looks very much like fascism. I've been alive a long time, John. I organize other old people like me at Third Act, which is for people over the age of 60 who care about climate and democracy. And we have a long, because of who we are, we have a long history. And the thing I hear most from my colleagues all across the country, and there's about 100,000 of us now, is that this is just completely unlike any other moment in the history of our lives. We've had bad presidents before that I didn't like, but we've never had anything that even resembles what we're enduring at the moment.
Yeah. Over the decades, Bill, you've led us not only in truth-telling and reporting on fossil fuels and the need for conversion to alternative sources of renewable energy, but also in organizing. And in organizing bottom-up people power movements, this is what I want to ask you about. Most significantly, 350.org And I remember well being in the People's Climate March, which was the largest protest in U.S. history at New York, led by you and 350.org. I looked it up, Bill, September 21, 2014. We had 425,000 people that day, Bill.
Yeah,
It was such a great day.
it was a great
I'd
day.
love to reminisce with you about it. But let me move on. I think, now, this is getting to my question, which is about movements. So just take me with a big grain of salt or see what you think. I think the only response now to this mythic global crisis which we have created, which no one has ever experienced before, the best thing we can do, ideally, is all do our part in building a global grassroots, bottom-up, people power movement of bold, active nonviolence, way beyond Gandhi and Dr. King, the likes of which the world has never seen. That literally we need billions of people actively, nonviolently resisting all these forms of injustice. So I want to ask you to speak about the need and the importance of participating in marches and protests and getting with the movement kind of no matter what. Howard Zinn used to say to me that in the end, movements become contagious. That's how nonviolence works. And it works when people are going to keep at it, whether they're going to live to see the victory or not.
Yes.
And that's the catch, so that we don't give into despair or depression. So tell us about that, or reflect with me on that.
Sure. I think that the two great inventions of the 20th century were the solar panel and the nonviolent social movement. I think that they're both remarkable pieces of technology that we're only now sort of learning how to really make use of. Obviously, there were antecedents to the 20th century experience with nonviolence, and you've written about the gospel antecedents of those with great power. But Gandhi, Dr. King, and a million other people whose names we don't know taught us a new way of doing politics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's extremely important and extremely rich and in depth in ways that sometimes people lose track of. So one of the things I'm thinking a lot about now is the fact that Gandhi spent as much of his time working on local economies and local handwork, really, as he did on standing up to British imperialism. Mm-hmm. The spinning wheel was his great symbol, and when I try to think about what that equivalent is for our time, I think that it's the rapid deployment of the solar panel, of renewable energy in all its forms around the world. Partly because it's necessary to keep us from overheating the planet, but also partly because it's deeply liberating. One of our two most important commodities after food, water, is energy. And at the moment, it comes from a relative handful of people in control of a small number of concentrated deposits of fossil fuel, all of whom abuse the wealth and power that provides them. But it doesn't need to be that way anymore. We now live on a planet when, thanks to the God-given wit of our scientists and engineers, the cheapest way to make power is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. And think how liberating that is. Because there's sun and wind available everywhere on this planet. It's impossible to hoard it. You can't hold it in reserve, although batteries now allow us to make use of it when the sun drops or the wind goes down. It's available to everyone everywhere. Hardly worth fighting a war over, And that possibility is remarkable. So some of the organizing that we're doing now is all about that. We've just announced plans for a big weekend of action on September 20th, 21st of this year that we're going to call Sun Day. And the whole point of Sunday will be to drive home the notion that this is no longer alternative energy, that this is now what we all should be using. It's not the whole foods of energy anymore, John. It's the Costco of energy. It's cheap, it's available in bulk, it's on the shelf, it's ready to go. And if we embrace that, then the possibilities of a different world begin to emerge. I'm I'm I've been thinking a lot about this because I've been writing a book about the sun, even as we've been planning this Sunday thing. And of course, one of the things that I've been meditating on is St. Francis's
Mm.
wonderful canticle of the
Yeah.
sun. And
Yeah.
it was the opening words of that canticle, Laudato Si, that Francis's namesake, now occupying the throne of St. Peter, used as the title for his remarkable encyclical on climate change and really on a critique of modernity, probably the most significant document yet this millennium. So I think these are extraordinarily deep questions and waters that we're moving into. We're not talking about techno fixes. We're talking about the possibility of very different worlds.
Wow, that's so beautiful and hopeful. Where can people find out about September 20th, Sunday, the National Day of Action? Seriously.
Two places. One is sunday.earth, and you'll really catch the vibe. This is going to be a day of great beauty, we
Wait,
hope, a
is
lot of
that
art
a
and music.
website?
Yes,
You said there's a
sunday.earth.
new web thing
Yep,
where you can have
yep,
.earth, not
.earth.
.edu.
Yep, sunday.earth.
The
And the other place, you can also just keep track of this stuff at Third Act, thirdact.org.
Okay.
Even if you're not 60 yet, we don't really check IDs. So, you can stop by and see how it's going.
That's
But
great.
there's lots and lots of groups that are contributing to this organizing for September.
Wonderful, and I can't wait to be a part of it, and I want to help out if I can.
Yes, indeed.
So I want to ask you about Third Act. It was so heartening, years ago when all of a sudden this young teenager, Greta Thunberg, stands up and starts speaking out so eloquently, like Martin Luther King, and inspires millions of young people around the world to go on strike to stop climate change. And then you launch a movement for older people over
Well,
60. They're
they're
like
related.
me. I'm,
They're related in lots of ways.
yeah, tell me
Greta's
all
one of my
about thirdact.org.
Greta's one of my favorite people in the world,
Me
and I
too.
love organizing with her. And she's just a remarkable human being. And the movement that she kicked off there with young people has been crucially important. The only problem with it was that I heard too many people my age saying, "Oh, it's up to the next generation to solve these problems," which is immoral, but also highly impractical in that when we deal with climate change, John, we're dealing with a timed test. We don't have very long to deal with it. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change tells us we need to cut emissions in half by 2030 to have some hope of staying on our Paris pathway. That doesn't provide time for the Gretas of the world to grow up and become presidents and CEOs and whatever. They're going to need some backup. And where should that backup come from? Well, as I thought about that, more and more the prospect of people my age as a potent force began to enter my mind. In this country, there are 70 million of us over the age of 60. We punch above our weight politically because we all vote, and there's no known way to stop old people from voting. And we ended up with most of the resources. And not everybody's rich by any means, but something like 70% of the country's financial assets belong to those people. And so that should give us, if we were able to organize it, some real power. And that's what we've started doing. Third Act now has working groups in pretty much every state. We have working groups composed of also of what people did in their lives. There's a third act lawyers group and a third act educators and a third act faith group that's mostly retired ministers and rabbis and imams, and and so it's been very beautiful and very powerful. People said it wouldn't work because the common feeling is that people become more conservative as they age. I don't know if that was true at one point, but if you think about it, people in their third act now, people in their 70s, 80s now, their first act was spent in that period of remarkable cultural, political, social upheaval and liberation in the 1960s and 1970s. That's very much in our muscle memory, our generational DNA. The moment when we started taking women seriously in public life, the apex of the civil rights movement, the first Earth Day with 20 million people in the streets, and half the people in third act were very active in all of that, and half of them have never done anything like it in their lives, but now find the time to do it and also the motivation because they do not want to leave behind a world worse than the one that they inherited. And that's what we're perhaps unique among generations about to do if we don't get our act together.
Well, that's great. Thank you for doing it. So we encourage everyone, go to thirdact.org, and it's a fabulous website, and sign up and join up. On another angle about this bill, a few years just before the pandemic, Jane Fonda got it in her head to start this vigil in front of the White House, and she asked you, and you said to her, "Thank God, Bill. Well, why don't you get arrested every week?" And that launched the Fire Drill Fridays movement at the U.S. Capitol. And every week there were hundreds getting arrested. And I went out and got arrested in one of those protests. And I've been arrested a lot, Bill. And I thought it was maybe the most brilliantly organized campaign I've ever been part of in my life. But I was so excited because you and I both say that we do need, and this is again Howard Zinn, he said in all the history of movements, you always do need a kind of a frontline group of people who are essential to a transformation, who are willing to go deep into nonviolence and cross the line and break bad laws which legalize injustice, and in this case, climate injustice. So can you just say a little bit about the importance of nonviolent civil disobedience on behalf of resisting climate injustice, and that if people are trained and can do it, they ought to consider it?
Yeah, look, I think that we build movements, and I worry sometimes that people decide that civil disobedience is the most important part of that work, because it might be the most glamorous or visible or something. 98% of the work isn't that. It's the much more mundane but crucial work of lobbying, of writing letters to the editor, of passing petitions, of on and on and on, the things that have to happen. There are moments, though, when we need to underline the moral urgency of things. And that's a moment when civil disobedience can come in handy. I don't think it's a tool we should use all the time, because I think, like all tools, it gets dull, literally and figuratively, with overuse. But I do think it's a good thing to have in your toolkit for. And I think that one of the things that's really powerful about it at the moment is, and this only works if people can maintain real and quite strict sense of nonviolence and peace, is that it's a kind of counter to the crazy anger that just seems to be free floating now in our political culture. So it's we're still learning as we go along. This is at best 100 years old that anybody's been trying any of this, and we learn more all the time about what works and what doesn't in different settings. But there are moments when it's really important.
Oh, thank you for that thoughtful answer. I want to ask you about Standing Rock. I remember running
Mm,
into you there, and when on a day's notice, went out for the National Clergy Day, and
hmm
this was part of the movement by the peoples there in North Dakota against the Keystone XL pipeline. And
Yes.
I wrote about it in my book, as you know, They Will Inherit the Earth. Well, just like a week before we're recording this, the courts with Trump ruled against Greenpeace and Standing Rock on behalf of the Keystone XL pipeline, and I guess we're waiting for appeal. So could you share your reflections on Standing Rock and the Greenpeace trial?
Sure. So the Dakota Access Pipeline, yes. Um, um, Look, the Greenpeace ruling is sad miscarriage of justice,
Yeah.
but it's also it's also a reminder of just how how out of touch these energy companies and things are. Greenpeace was helpful in that work, as were other groups, but this was coming straight from the heart uh, uh, of Indian country. I mean, this was just remarkable organization by the tribes, and lots of tribes. There were hundreds of different Indian nations there for that in ways that really hadn't happened on this continent, I think, in a couple of centuries. And so that was one of the things that made it so relentlessly powerful. But of course, it was also a reminder that we have to work on all kinds of fronts. Um, you know, while we were out there at Standing Rock, is when Donald Trump won his first election. And if he hadn't won that election, I think we could have convinced Hillary Clinton to shut that pipeline down. So it's a reminder that you got to work in many different ways in order to get done the things that need doing.
I'm so glad. Thank you. I'm so glad you said that, because when I was reading about Greenpeace, I was thinking so much about the great time I had there. And I didn't see Greenpeace there at all. But I met thousands of Native folk and young
Yeah, yeah,
people because they asked me to speak to the crowd.
yeah, yeah.
And whereas Greenpeace was, really behind Jane Fonda and the Fire Drill Fridays. It's like they picked the wrong movement, although maybe they, of course, know what they're doing. But I like your answer. We keep going forward and doing what we can. Okay, let me ask you a couple more. I want to ask you about the spiritual angle or dimension of all of this, because in the end, it's not just a political or environmental or social or racial issue, whatever that means. It's a spiritual issue and a human issue and a universal issue. It's what I've been arguing, as you know, Bill, is that, um, well, that let's how do I put this? There are spiritual consequences of climate chaos and destroying the planet. That might sound a silly way to put it, because there's physical, actual consequences in this that's going to affect the lives and deaths of maybe millions of people. But what we're saying was we're going to just destroy everything the Creator created, in the mythic beauty of Genesis, whether through nuclear weapons or our ongoing use of fossil fuels, and that this has to be front and center, part of our spiritual lives from now on. And in that book I was looking at how all the different faiths are responding to that. It was just agreement across the board that this is a central question of any faith and understanding in the holy or the mystery of God or spirituality. Can you share where you are with any of those thoughts?
Well, me. I'm just I've never risen higher in the ecclesial hierarchy than Methodist Sunday school teacher.
Well, it's
Um,
still not too
but
late, Bill. It's not too
but no, it might be too late for me. But um, I think I think you're right. Obviously, I mean, I think that we're the very first command we're given in the good book is to take care of this earth, and it's
really.
the one we've done the worst at. And the command that we're given in the Gospels is to love our neighbors. And at the moment we're drowning them and sickening them and making it impossible for them to grow food, and on and on and on. Um, So all of that is extremely true, and as I say, I think that Laudato Si was the best take on all of this that we've had. The Pope's remarkable encyclical really is powerful, but I'd add too that it's one of the things that's beautiful about the prospect of renewable energy, of making energy from the shining sun and the blowing breeze, energy from heaven, not from hell, John. We're able to imagine a very different world coming at us.
That's great, Bill. Thanks. And I want to ask you a little bit about nonviolence. As I've read you over the decades and followed you and heard you speak at various things we've been at, I found that we're both students of Gandhi and Dr. King. And as you know, Gandhi said Jesus was the greatest person of nonviolence who ever lived, and that the only people who don't know that he's nonviolent are Christians. I hate laughing at it, but he was a funny guy.
Yes.
So I'm convinced that an authentic Christian life in such a world of total violence, now on the verge of even nuclear war, but catastrophic climate change destroying ourselves, is a return to the nonviolence of Jesus, as Gandhi and King insisted. And I've been moved that you always talk of nonviolence. And so what are your thoughts these days about nonviolence, Christian nonviolence, and its place in daily life and also in our work as activists?
You know, I love and revere Gandhi and Dr. King. The person that I keep thinking about, in some ways, my greatest hero of all, is Ghaffar Abdul Khan.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The frontier Gandhi, they
Yeah.
called him.
Yeah.
Doing his work in an almost impossible situation in what we'd now call sort of Afghanistan along the Pakistani border.
Yeah.
And Gandhi said he was the one person that really ever understood nonviolence.
Yeah.
But he raised up a nonviolent army of hundreds of thousands of people who were able to, in many ways, shame the British out of that part of the world. And then he had to do the same thing against the Pakistanis when they took over. He's a reminder to me that this crosses all denominations, that Muslims are every bit as much leaders in this work as anyone else. But it's also, I think, a good lesson for the very, very difficult moment in which we find ourselves now. This feels like an extremely dark time. When extremely dark forces, many of them cloaked in the mantle of something they call Christianity, are 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 undercutting so much that we hold dear about our history, our nation, our possibilities. And so I think it's really important to understand that people have been in very difficult places before, and that through courage and good humor and good spirit, they've managed to build things that brought us forward. And I hope that we're capable of doing that. Again, I'm not convinced that we'll be able to, because the challenges that we're up against are in some ways time limited. If we don't solve the climate crisis very soon, then we will not solve it. But as long as I've got strength to do it, I'll keep doing what I can. And I know you will too, and I know lots of other people will. The only thing I'd say is, don't try to do it by yourself. The American default's always towards a kind of individualism. But the most important thing an individual can do at this point is to be a little less of an individual and join together with others in building the movements big enough to make change. That's why we start things like Third Act.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And it was actually what I was going to ask you next. A great friend of ours on the West Coast just died lifelong activist, David Hartsough. I don't know if you ever met him. He
Mm.
started 100 movements. I mean, you probably were part of many of them. He met when he was 15 with John Kennedy about nuclear weapons and 5 other Quakers, and it had a huge impact on his friends of Dr. King. And he was organizing and getting arrested until just 2 months ago at 85. His
Mm.
whole life message was just that, Bill. Um, I never sat around just stewing and getting angry and feeling depressed and helpless. I immediately found a few friends. 5 is all you need, or 10.
Yeah.
And let's do something locally or in our state or in the country. And
Yep.
many of those took off like you. Can you say more about that? Because you've really gone to town with this. And it's like I on a recent podcast I had Shane Claiborne on. I was trying to say, how do we help people become organizers or realize they have more power, or that even just a small handful of friends can make a difference? I think that's the lesson from Jesus to Abdul Ghaffar Khan. But it's more than that, too. It gets you out of your depression and your despair. That's why Dan Bergen said to me as a kid, Bill, if you want to be hopeful, you have to do hopeful things.
Yeah. Well, this is a good place to end. I'll just say, um, I started life as a writer, and I still am a writer. That's my craft. But at a certain point, I realized that just providing more data and information and things was, we could win the argument, but to win the fight, we were going to have to take on money and power. And that's why we also have to organize. We have to win the argument and the fight. And happily, we have this tool to do that. Nonviolent organizing is a way that the small and the many can take on the mighty and the few. And we're very lucky to live in a moment when you don't have to form an army to go, kill people to make change. You have to instead build a movement that can sway both hearts and minds, and in the process, change power. And we'll see if we can do that. There are good signs right now around the country of people standing up to the tyranny that we're experiencing from DC, but it's obviously going to be a very hard fight. And so we keep our humor, we keep our love for each other, we keep our eyes fixed on the future, and on we go.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, that's a great note to end on. And will you come back someday and talk with me about Sunday, your new book? And
Absolutely.
all right.
Absolutely.
Well,
I'll look forward to it.
thank you,
You take
Bill.
care, friend.
Thank you,
All right.
Bill, and God bless you.
God bless you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, friends, for listening to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. You can hear more podcasts and find other upcoming Zoom programs at beatitudecenter.org. And please consider offering a donation to support this free work. And if you can, please leave some positive feedback or review at NCR or Apple or Spotify or whatever platform you use. May the God of peace bless us all. Keep on following the Nonviolent Jesus. See you next time.